security officials and national security officials in the U.S. government, at least, are concerned about. How quickly does this type of event escalate, and particularly with cyber, where sovereignty and geography aren't as important in some ways as sort of traditional military activity. You could see actions and effects happening well across the world and outside of Ukraine.
John, that leads me kind of to my next point, and I don't want to be too theoretical here, but, does there need to be more of a cohesion between public and private sector here in the United States to build up and shore up defenses on cyber in the event that there is some type of attack or onslaught by Russia, and not just Russia, but other nefarious actors as well? Are you confident in that bridge? Is there a bridge right now between the public and the private?
So I think you make a very good point there, that there has been an evolution over the last almost decade, that the threat that is being posed by sort of foreign nation states, and certainly in the world of cyber, has evolved from targeting government systems, and to sort of pull an example from a mentor of mine, the plans for the F-35, the classified plans or something else like that, to broadening out to looking at the personnel files of government officials, even now to sort of looking at the documents and files and data of companies throughout the United States. So I think there's a couple things happening there. One, there's a much bigger sort of integration of technology across our society, and that results in having potential significant impacts to a country, and to the ability to apply sort of significant pressure, political pressure against a country, even if you're not targeting sort of the government systems themselves. And so you can look to an example like Colonial Pipeline that shut down sort of activity across the eastern seaboard and caused mass confusion. And so I think because of that, you're seeing the government sort of change postures and trying to do the best that they can to sort of integrate and harmonize their activities with the private sector. And you've seen that with a lot of collaborative relationships in the prior administration, and certainly in this administration, led by CISA, NSA, and the sort of the National Cyber Director's Office out of the White House.
John, though, and you were talking about critical infrastructure, not only in Ukraine, but here at home. When do you think such cyber actions will be kind of, codified into international law that could be, tantamount to an invasion, to war? A lot of this is done sub rosa. A lot of the counter responses as well, we don't really see that they're classified, that they strike back, tenfold, they being the United States, to whatever malicious actor. When does this all kind of get out in the open?
So you've identified one of the core challenges of trying to conduct statecraft when you're dealing with cyber. The lines in the sand just aren't clear. There hasn't been a history and certainly public examples of types of activities that different nation states would consider to be, across the line. I certainly think that there have been sort of clear communications and statements at international bodies like the UN that if you are, attacking and going after sort of core critical functions, including potentially some aspects of critical infrastructure, that might be something that would be tantamount to an invasion or a violation of sovereignty. But it's really difficult to sort of identify where those lines are when so much of it is happening, one, outside of the public eye, that you can't really see what's happening. And two, some of it is happening not necessarily by state actors, but by proxies or criminal threat actors that are acting either at the behest or, with the sort of wink and a nod by various nation states.
John, just lastly, what are you going to be looking for, especially on the cyber front, as we go into the next 24 hours in Ukraine? We're already getting reports that some communication lines have been taken offline, we know that basically civil aircraft are restricted from flying in all of Ukrainian airspace. But especially on the cyber front, what do you think they're going to go after next?
I mean, the Russians have incredible capabilities in this area and have used them in the past. So I would anticipate sort of full-scale knocking down of systems in Ukraine. I don't think that sort of direct attack is the type of thing that would be, at this point, levied against those nations that are critical of Russian actions, like the United States. However, I do think that the activities in Ukraine are increasing the overall sort of threat posture for any sort of entity that's operating in some of the countries that are critical of Ukraine. So what you may see there is not necessarily sort of state action, the GRU or someone else firing off malware or something like that, but you may see sort of loosening of the reins on cyber threat actors, criminal cyber threat actors, ransomware purveyors, and that type of thing. And that could potentially create sort of a real threat for private sector companies that are just sort of wanting to sit this out and see what's happening. But, again, going back to what the U.S. ambassador to the UN said, no one's going to be able to sit on the sidelines of this.
John Dermody, we appreciate your time and your expertise into this, and we'll no doubt be speaking again in the next couple of days, I'm sure.
My pleasure.
All right. Right now, though, we do have a new shot that just popped up of Russian President Vladimir Putin on Russian state TV giving an address right now. You can see we have some video of it. Of course, it is all in Russian. I will do my best. We're getting right now some of these translations, and I'm going to read for you what Putin is saying to his people. I'm going to be reading some of the quotes from the speech from start to finish. Right now, Putin, like I said before, has said he has declared a special military operation in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbas region. He says, quote, "A couple of words for those who would be tempted to intervene. Russia will respond immediately, and you will have consequences that you never have had before in your history." He says, "Our analysis has concluded that our confrontation with these forces, these Ukrainian forces, is inevitable." He says, quote, "We have to preserve Russia and Russian territorial integrity." So right now we are showing you video of what is going out on the airwaves in Russia right now on state television by President Putin. Putin announcing a special military operation in the Donbas. He says, quote, "I am counting on unity of the government. The fate of Russia is in credible hands of our multinational country." Right now, we're getting more and more quotes from this speech. It is, of course, in Russian. He says about NATO expansion, quote, "For U.S. and its allies, it is so-called Russia deterrence policy. For our country, it is an existential issue." He says, quote, "Ukraine is having modern foreign weaponry pumped into it. This is an existential threat to our Russian statehood, our sovereignty." He says, quote, "We cannot tolerate the threat that emanates from modern Russia." So right now we are working to get more and more statements and comments about what Vladimir Putin is saying there. That is coming to us from some of the translators and transcripts we have here at Fox as we continue to cover this. Of course, the UN Security Council meeting still ongoing. The Ghanaian ambassador to the United Nations right now is speaking on the dais there. We are also tracking afterwards, after this meeting is concluded, if they will come out and make statements. Linda Thomas Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador, did that on Monday night. And we hope she will do the same. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
and political independence of Ukraine in line with the core tenets of the United Nations Charter. Kenya is deeply concerned by the rapid escalation of the conflict risks following the recognition of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states by the Russian Federation and the continued military escalation. We are concerned that there is a serious risk that a conflict enveloping the whole of the Donbas region will occur, present trends holding. Such a development would instantly lead to significant loss of life, a humanitarian crisis, and the large-scale population movement of refugees and internally displaced people. Kenya urgently calls for calm by all parties and their commitment to protecting civilians and civilian objects from any actions contrary to international law and international humanitarian law. We continue to believe that there is still an opportunity for diplomacy to produce a solution to this dangerous crisis. The required diplomatic steps should seek, in the short term, for a de-escalation of the situation and the limiting of all military maneuvers to prevent sparking a wider conflict. For this to happen, there must also be a stated commitment to negotiations between NATO and the Russian Federation in the middle and long term. Such a commitment will need the vision to design a viable security architecture for Europe that protects the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of Ukraine and other states, while being sensitive to the concerns of all relevant parties. Mr. President, we want to believe that this chamber, in light of its storied past, retains the wisdom and wherewithal to prevent a catastrophic war. We have confidence that the United Nations Charter, embraced as a whole, protects Ukraine and all countries, not only those with modest military means, but also the world's nuclear powers. When we consider the recent past of wars undertaken by choice, and when the Charter and international law were breached, eventually the safety and security of all parties was tragically undermined. Mr. President, the membership of this chamber was fundamentally shaped by the states that emerged victorious from World War II. In doing so, the Charter bestowed on them a special responsibility that reflected the sacrifices they had made to defeat a unique evil to mankind. We believe that the leaders who designed today's multilateral system were profoundly humbled by the catastrophic war they had survived. So much so that they were inspired to erect the sovereign.
Okay, this is Andrew Kraft back here. We've been listening to the Kenya ambassador to the United Nations right now, in addition to many other ambassadors around the table there. As we continue to cover all the latest, we are learning that President Biden will speak tomorrow. He just issued a statement on Russia's unprovoked and unjustified attack on Ukraine. I'm going to read it in part. It says, quote, "The prayers of the entire world are with the people of Ukraine tonight as they suffer an unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring, and the United States and its allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable." Of course, this UN Security Council meeting still ongoing at this point in time. I want to bring in one of our national security experts, friend of the program, Hal Kempfer, to respond to all of this latest news that seemingly is just breaking each and every minute here. Hal, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me on. There's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. It's a very fluid situation. Right now, I want to put up a tweet from Fox News correspondent Jennifer Griffin, and she says, quote, "A U.S. official tells me right now we're seeing the pre-assault fires. Expect this to go on for a few hours. Land attack to follow with all of the full forces Putin has arrayed, explosions heard in Kyiv, Odessa, Mariupol. It has begun." We're also getting reports from Fox News correspondent Trey Yingst, who is in Kyiv. He said explosions in Kyiv. Of course, right now it's about 5:30 in the morning there. We have a live now look in Maidan Square. Hal, your reactions, we've been talking about this now for seemingly almost a month. It is here.
It is here. And what we're seeing are, whether you call them pre-assault fires, and that's perfectly acceptable military language, or preparatory fires prior to going in, we're seeing attacked fires all over. Now, the interesting thing is Odessa, that kind of indicates to me possible naval fires. Could be missile fires, could potentially involve naval gunfire, but that's what that kind of indicates. And that's interesting. That is showing that they're going in deep. They're hitting targets all over the country. Obviously, Kyiv, which is the capital city. Those are, and keep in mind, we only have so much information. Those are probably missile fires. They may be followed up with airstrikes. Part of what that does, though, even if you don't have ground forces going all the way down to Kyiv, for example, what that does is it fixes Ukrainian forces around the country in place. You're not going to shift your forces to the east if you're afraid that they're coming from the south and the north as well. And that's what it appears is happening. You know, certainly from a military planning standpoint, that would be a logical thing to do, to use those fires. They have the capability. So to use those fires. Also, tremendous psychological impact on the citizenry and the political leaders, and also the military leaders as well in those areas. When they get hit with fires, it slows down their ability to react. It slows down, the ability to evacuate people, because they don't know if they want to get on the road because they could become targets of fire. So there's a lot of reasons why they would do this.
Hal, I wanted to get your thoughts as well. We had a very moving, stirring, and poignant speech today by the Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. Some of it, a majority of it, was in Russian. This was a speech not only to Ukrainians, but to Russians as well across the border, urging for peace. We also got the news today that Zelenskyy essentially called the Kremlin, requesting to speak with Putin. It went unanswered. It was denied. We're also learning about an hour ago that there is a flight restriction in all of Ukraine for civilian aircraft. And we have been tracking some of the flight tracking websites, and there are no planes over the country of Ukraine. It was entirely clear of air traffic. Is that normal? And of course, does that spark fears as well that any wrong move could down a passenger airliner like we saw back in 2014?
Well, Andrew, part of it is psychological, obviously. It impacts a lot of different ways. The snub of the phone call is to be expected. There's really nothing more for them to talk about. Obviously, Putin has made up his mind. The confusion with the head of the Russian security service and with the U.S. ambassador, or with the Russian ambassador to the U.S. this weekend, indicated to me that Putin is keeping very close counsel, that some of his key members of his cabinet and those around him may not even know what he's thinking at any given time, which is also an indication of a lot of strong operational security on his end to avoid any leaks. And there has been a lot of information coming out. It's tough to say if some of that's not deliberate by Russia, but that's part of what we're seeing there. Now, shutting down the airspace, that's just prudent. That's anytime you have a large military air operation, the Ukrainian Air Force wants freedom of operations, and obviously the Russian Air Force wants freedom of operation. So even if it wasn't announced de facto, you'd want to shut it down. I think both sides, after seeing what happened with the airliner being shut down, would go to extremes to make sure that there were no civilian airliners or any civilian aircraft because frankly, whatever's flying right now is a target by one side or the other. So they're freeing up that. Same thing with the notice to mariners in the Black Sea and certainly the Sea of Azov, where they're trying to make sure there's no mariners out there. You're going to see a lot of maritime action. I am fully expecting to see an amphibious assault. If it doesn't happen in the next few hours, it could happen the next day, but I'm fully expecting to see that simply because they have the capability. The Marines are embarked on ship, from what I understand. So I would expect that they would do something, if nothing more than to throw uncertainty into the planning process of the Ukrainians and also achieve a certain element of surprise to throw them off balance and to fix their forces in place. At some point, the Ukrainians will figure out where the main thrust, where the main effort is of the Russian forces. Are they going for the entire country? Are they going for certain parts of the eastern Ukraine? Could a lot of this be hit everywhere, make it look like they're coming everywhere, and in the end, they simply seize that southeastern quadrant of Ukraine? We don't know. That's a very likely scenario. I would say it's a probable scenario. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't launch missiles on all these other cities as well, just to sow confusion, and of course to basically immobilize the movement of Russian forces from one theater of action to another.
Hell yeah. And back to your point about amphibious assaults, we are seeing some reports as well of explosions in the port city of Mariupol. We're also getting more and more of this translation from the Russian President Putin, who was literally speaking. I think he's still speaking, Hal, while we are speaking. And I want to read a quote that was just translated. He says, "A couple of words for those who would be tempted to intervene. Russia will respond immediately, and you will have consequences that you never have had before in your history." That is threatening language to maybe the United States, European allies, anyone who wants to get in the way of Vladimir Putin.
Well, they're engaging in psychological operations and disinformation against the West. They're trying to stop us from doing something more concerted. The big fear that Russia has in this is not that they're going to get stopped cold at the border. If the Ukrainian forces are prepared, and I believe they are prepared, their strategy will be to basically trade terrain for kinetic kills. They're going to gradually pull back their forces. They're going to move from battle position to battle position to battle position, and they're going to use the terrain to their advantage, try to inflict as much battle damage, as many casualties as possible on the Russians' part. One of the vulnerabilities, the biggest vulnerability the Russians have, is they've got somewhere between 2/3 to 75% of their operational ground combat units already committed. There really isn't some big strategic reserve that they can pull in. Now, if they attack everywhere, and maybe they're using the fires, and at the same time they're doing a shift to come into another area, that's very possible. We did that during Desert Storm, did the famous hook movement where we actually had everybody fixed in place, and then we maneuvered around and came into Kuwait. Well, that could be something they're thinking about as well. But with that said, there's just a lot of different possibilities going on in terms of the whole thinking, and we're going to find out over time.
Yeah. Hal, earlier today during the Pentagon press briefing, 80% of forces have moved into ready positions. That was earlier today. The bulk of that 80% are obviously on the ground. They also say we have believed Putin has assembled 100% of his aviation assets, 100% of his maritime assets, and near 100% of his ground, very close to 100%. Hal, stay with us right now. The Russian ambassador to the United Nations is speaking yet again, and I believe we're about to hear from the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations as well. Hal, be on standby for us. Thanks.
Okay.
The whole people without distinction of race, creed, or color, the whole people living in that territory. End of quote. Today's government in Ukraine simply is not that. And the tragedy in Ukraine started indeed after the illegal coup in Maidan in 2014, when, rather than dialogue with the Russian-speaking citizens of Ukraine, the new authorities brandished guns and airplanes at them. Information and testimony to this end is more than sufficient. However, our Western colleagues prefer not to notice this. We tried yesterday and today, before yesterday, to explain to you the logic of the decision made by Russia to recognize the LPR and DPR, and we focused on the need to ensure peace and security there. However, you didn't want to hear this, and you don't want to hear it now. For you, those living in the Donbass are simply pawns in a geopolitical game focused on weakening Russia and promoting the bloc from NATO to its borders. For us, these people are women, children, the elderly, who for 8 years have been cowering from Ukraine's shelling and provocations. For us, these are Ukraine people and not the Maidan authorities. In this is the difference in our approaches. If you do not change the geopolitical lens, you will never understand us. Then, those on whose behalf this decision I mentioned was made, who you've not even thought about for over these 8 years, simply calling them pro-Russian separatists and terrorists. Those people are the most important for us. I'd like to say once again that the root of today's crisis around Ukraine is the actions of Ukraine itself, who for many years was sabotaging its obligations under the Minsk package of measures. Last week even, there was a hope that Kiev would rethink and nevertheless implement what it signed up to do in 2015. For this, first and foremost, they needed direct dialogue with Donetsk and Lugansk. However, further confirmation that Ukraine is not ready for this type of dialogue and steps to grant Donbass special status as set forth in the Minsk agreements, while
не прекратились, но и интенсифицировались. Руководство ЛНР и ДНР обратилось к нам с просьбой оказать военную поддержку.
Inasmuch as I already said, the Ukrainian provocation against those in Donbass not only has not stopped, but has intensified, the leaders of the LPR and the DPR turned to us with a request to provide military support in line with bilateral cooperation agreements as agreed at the same time as they were recognition. This is a logical step, which is a consequence of the actions of the Ukrainian regime. During this meeting, the President of Russia, Putin, spoke with and said that he made a decision for a special military operation in the Donbass. We don't know all the details today, but briefly I would like to inform you that from his statement it says that the occupation of Ukraine is not in our plans. The aim of this special operation is to protect the people who for over 8 years have been suffering genocide from the Kiev regime, and for this we will aim to demilitarize and de-genocide in Ukraine, and also support those and hold accountable those who carried out so many crimes against civilians, including citizens of the Russian Federation. This decision was made in line with Article 51 of the UN Charter and the sanction of the Russian Federation and fulfilling the agreement on recognition of the LPR and DPR. We're receiving a lot of information and we will analyze this and we will keep you up to speed with this. Now I resume my function as President of the Council and I give the floor to the representative of Ukraine.
Okay, right now the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations will be making a statement as his country is under an invasion.
Distinguished members of the Security Council, Secretary General, Under-Secretary, before I try to deliver parts of the statement that I came here with tonight, most of it is already useless since 10 p.m. New York time. I would like to cite Article 4 of the UN Charter, and it says, membership in the United Nations is open to all other peace-loving states which accept the obligations contained in the present charter and in the judgment of the organization are able and willing to carry out these obligations. Russia is not able to carry out any of the obligations. The ambassador of the Russian Federation 3 minutes ago confirmed that his president declared a war on my country. So before I read parts of my statement, I would like to avail of the presence of the Secretary General and request the Secretary General to distribute among the members of the Security Council and the members of the General Assembly the legal memos by the Legal Council of the United Nations dated December 1991, and in particular the legal memo dated 19th of December 1991, the one that we've been trying to get out of the Secretariat for a very long time and we were denied to get it. The Article 4, Paragraph 2 of the Charter reads, "The admission of any such state to membership in the United Nations will be effected by a decision of the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council." Mr. Secretary General, please instruct the Secretariat to distribute among the members of the Security Council and the members of the General Assembly a decision by the Security Council dated December 1991 that recommends that the Russian Federation can be a member of this organization, as well as a decision by the General Assembly dated December 1991, where General Assembly welcomes the Russian Federation to this organization. It would be a miracle if the Secretariat is able to produce such decisions. There is nothing in the Charter of the United Nations about continuity as a sneaky way to get into the organization. So when I was coming here an hour ago or so, I was intending to ask the Russian ambassador to confirm on the record that the Russian troops will not start firing at Ukrainians today and go ahead with the offensive. It became useless 48 minutes ago. Because about 48 minutes ago, your president declared the war on Ukraine. So now I would like to ask the ambassador of the Russian Federation to say on the record that at this very moment, your troops do not shell and bomb Ukrainian cities, that your troops do not move in the territory of Ukraine. You have a smartphone, you can call Lavrov right now. We can make a pause to let you go out and call him. If you are not in a position to give an affirmative answer, the Russian Federation ought to relinquish responsibilities of the President of the Security Council, pass these responsibilities on to a legitimate member of the Security Council, a member that is respectful of the Charter, and I ask the members of the Security Council to convene an emergency meeting immediately and consider all necessary draft decisions to stop the war. Because it's too late, my dear colleagues, to speak about de-escalation. Too late. the Russian president declared a war on the record. Should I play the video of your president? Ambassador, shall I do that right now, or you can confirm it? Do not interrupt me, please. Thank you.
Then don't ask me questions when you are speaking. Proceed with your statement.
Anyway, you declared the war. It is the responsibility of this body to stop the war. So I call on every one of you to do everything possible to stop the war. Or should I play the video with your president declaring the war? Thank you very much.
Опять я вынужден сказать.
Against, I must say that I thank the representative of Ukraine for his statement, and the questions, I wasn't planning to answer them because I've already said all I know at this point. Waking up Minister Lavrov at this time is not something I plan to do. You said the information that we have will be something we provide. And this isn't called a war, this is called a special military operation in the Donbass. I now give the floor to the representative of Germany.
Mr. President, we meet at the very moment of a military escalation we have not experienced in Europe for over a generation's time. The President of the Russian Federation announced a military operation on Ukrainian territory. We condemn this in the strongest possible terms. And we call upon all members of the Security Council and the United Nations to now stand up for Ukraine and against a shameless breach of international law. 2 days ago, Russia's decision to recognize the self-proclaimed so-called People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk was harshly rejected in this Council. It had already dealt a devastating blow to the principles and the international order that the United Nations stand for. Russia has not listened, and it turns out it was not prepared to listen. It has continued its massive military buildup, and we observed and observe cyber attacks directed against Ukraine, and now Russian military is moving into Ukrainian territory. By the actions and this unprovoked military operation, Russia is violating the core principles of the UN Charter. We condemn the use of force against innocent people and the violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine in the strongest possible terms. We urge Russia to terminate its military action against Ukraine immediately and withdraw its troops. Mr. President, our thoughts are with the Ukrainian people. We will be steadfast in our support for Ukraine and our support for the UN Charter. The Russian aggression will come at an unprecedented price politically, economically, and morally. Mr. President, France, Ukraine, and my country stood ready for diplomacy, for another meeting in the Normandy format, or for the summit that Ukraine had proposed. With our allies and partners, we called on Russia to seek a diplomatic way forward in vain. Now is the moment to speak up and defend the international order of the UN Charter against unilateral aggression, jointly and decisively. Tonight we stand with Ukraine, and we are doing so unwavering and determined. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Germany for her statement. And now I give the floor to the United States, who wish to make a further statement.
Thank you. In my remarks tonight, I said that we predicted Russia's false flag attacks, the misinformation, the theatrical emergency meetings, and the cyber attacks. But one piece had not come to pass. Unfortunately, while we've been meeting in the Security Council tonight, it appears that President Putin has ordered that last step. At the exact time as we are gathered in the Council seeking peace, Putin delivered a message of war in total disdain for the responsibility of this Council. This is a grave emergency. The Council will need to act, and we will put a resolution on the table tomorrow. As President Biden said tonight, Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring, and the United States and our allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable. Thank you.
Я благодарю.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and now I'd like to give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom, who asked to make a further statement.
Thank you. As we sat in this chamber urging Russia to step back, President Putin announced special military operations on Ukrainian territory. This is unprovoked and unjustified. This is a grave day for Ukraine and for the principles of the United Nations. We and our partners have been clear that there will be consequences for Russia's actions. We fully support the United States call for a UN Security Council resolution. This council must do all it can to stop the war and uphold the Charter. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom, and now I'll give the floor to the representative of Albania, who also wished to make a further statement.
Dear colleagues, we could not end this meeting that what we had feared and anticipated since days is happening. Explosions are reported in Kiev and in several other cities in Ukraine. Mosques are finally down and tanks are in. As we speak, Russia is implementing its plan and attacking a neighbor to whom it has decided to deny existence, freedom, the land, dignity, and life. We call on all the members of the United Nations to rally in support of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, to stand with Ukraine and its people, to condemn firmly and unequivocally this aggression, to stand for peace, for rules, for international law, and take whatever measures they deem necessary to show the aggressor that its actions will bear consequences. Let me reiterate, Russia will be held responsible for the consequences of an unprovoked war, for the loss of human lives, for causing unbearable human pain, and for opting for destruction when we need development, for bringing death where we aspire for need and for hope, for choosing to become an outlaw when we need cooperation. Russia will bear historical blame and shame and the consequences of invading a neighboring country and attempting to destroy European security. Let's unite and make sure it will not succeed.
Final words there from the Albanian ambassador to the United Nations. We also just heard from both representatives from the United States and the United Kingdom as they wanted to add more to their statement after the final statement from the Ukrainian ambassador, essentially saying that while this meeting has been going on, the invasion has started and is happening right now. We're getting reports from some of our sources who have family and friends in Ukraine right now that there have been reports of explosions in Kyiv, Russian airborne troops near Odessa, and a battle near Kharkiv. Right now, we want to bring in Hal Kempfer, who we have been relying on so much throughout the duration of this as we continue to monitor these developments right now. Hal, thanks for being with us. I just want to put up yet a new live look that we have gotten, Hal. This is out of the port city of Mariupol there on the Black Sea, I believe. Right now, it is almost, I believe, 7 in the morning on the dot. Excuse me, almost 6 in the morning on the dot in Ukraine. Hal, just your thoughts listening in to the emergency council there. We just lost that shot. We do have our live look out of Kyiv right now. Hal, your thoughts about what was said in the Security Council meeting, essentially the United States and the United Kingdom having to update their statements because during the meeting itself, the invasion is ongoing.
Andrew, it was interesting. All the ambassadors, particularly the Ukraine ambassador, had to update their statements because, frankly, what they were going to say had become overcome by events. The invasion is on. I might point out that loss of signal could be a cyber attack by the Russians. That would make sense. If you're dropping airborne troops, paratroopers, airborne units, as has been reported along the Black Sea in Ukraine, you don't drop those units unless you know that they're going to be linking up with ground units in the very near future. So if they're seeing paratroopers coming in along the Black Sea, then they're going to be linking up with something, whether that's a mechanized, high-speed mechanized assault, moving up some major roads in order to link up with them, which would be a rather risky move, or potentially linking up with maritime, I should say, amphibious forces, which would seem to me to be a little bit more likely. If you recall back in Normandy, that we dropped airborne divisions behind the beaches of Normandy, and then they linked up, and they actually fought their way back to the coast and linked up with the forces that came ashore. That's a time-proven methodology in terms of amphibious warfare. That could be what we're seeing on the Black Sea. That would be consistent with all the reporting. That would certainly be consistent with what I've thought they were going to do all along. And so of all the reports coming out, that one about paratroopers or airborne forces is the one that really catches my eye, because that says that there's some sort of major operation happening in the south. And if it is the south, and if it's further to the west, that also changes some assumptions, because if they plan to stay there, then we're not just talking about that southeast quadrant that runs along the Sea of Azov. Now we're talking about if they're doing something that's going further west with all these other attacks and doing a major amphibious assault, that indicates that they may be looking at sweeping along the south and then shooting north. And again, from an operational, from a tactical standpoint, that would make a lot of sense. If that's what their goal was, to take over the entire country. I don't want to get too far ahead of what we know, because the reporting is very limited in terms of that information. But that could be an indicator of what their full intent is. The next thing is to look to see if all the feeds from the northern cities start disappearing as well. And with everything now, cyber attacks are just part and parcel of warfare. That's just part of what you do, taking communications out as well.
Yeah, Hal, I just want to update our viewers. There have been some statements from officials. We do know now that the Security Council meeting has concluded. Actually, let's wait on that. They're stepping up to the podium to make some statements. Let's listen in.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is the third time in a row that Russian presidency has not allowed us to speak under the Rule 37. And so, as PR of Estonia, I am delivering this statement here on behalf of the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and my own country, Estonia. We welcome and underline the urgency of today's emergency meeting on the UN Security Council, the fourth over the last 4 weeks, to discuss the latest developments concerning Russia's further aggression against Ukraine. We thank the Secretary General and Undersecretary General Di Carlo for their briefings. The Council was convening as we witness yet another escalatory step as a result of a deliberate policy of aggression by the Russian leadership, and that has led us to this conflict. We unequivocally condemn the announcement by President Putin and the military operation in Ukraine. It is unprovoked and unlawful act of aggression. Ukraine is facing a repeated violation of its territorial integrity after the illegal annexation of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sebastopol in 2014. Acts of aggression and the use of force are violations of international law, including the UN Charter that require accountability. We call on all UN member states and UN bodies to prevent the pending war and put a stop to the violations against the state and people of Ukraine. The request for military assistance by Moscow from the so-called People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk announces a very dangerous additional step against Ukraine's sovereignty. It would risk thousands of lives. It follows the decision by President Putin to recognize the non-government controlled areas of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts of Ukraine as independent entities and the ensuing decision to send Russian troops into these areas, preceded by the unprecedented buildup of troops on Ukraine's border. We have strongly condemned these decisions as blatant breaches of international law, including the UN Charter, as well as of the Minsk agreements. We heard numerous similar messages of condemnation and concern from among countries around the world, across all regional groups at the General Assembly today. We have heard from the UN Secretary General, who stated that the decision of the Russian Federation to recognize the so-called independence of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions is a violation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, and inconsistent with the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. It undermines the United Nations itself. The UN should not share the fate of the League of Nations. The Secretary General also made clear his concern about the perversion of the concept of peacekeeping. Troops entering the territory of another country without its consent are not impartial peacekeepers, nor are they peacekeepers at all, as he pointed out. They are called invaders. Yet we note today that these persistent calls for the respect of international law, diplomacy, and dialogue continue to be unheeded. We underline that the Russian Federation's use of force against Ukraine is completely unjustified and unacceptable. It must be met with unity, firmness, and determination in solidarity with Ukraine. The European Union has responded to the latest violations, including with additional restrictive measures. We stand ready to adopt more wide-ranging political and economic sanctions. Russia's actions against Ukraine are not a matter just for Ukraine or for Europe. They have severe implications globally for every UN member state and the rules-based international order. We urge the Russian Federation, as a party to the conflict, to reverse the recognition of the so-called People's Republics, uphold its commitments, abide by international law, and return to the discussions within the Normandy format and the Trilateral Contact Group. It has a clear responsibility under international law to work to find a peaceful settlement of the conflict. We strongly urge Russia to respect the principles of the UN Charter, to refrain from any further escalatory actions, and to engage in meaningful diplomacy. We reiterate the unwavering support of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania for Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. We, with the international community, stand in solidarity with Ukraine. Thank you.
Good evening. The Secretary General will make some remarks, and then we'll take a few questions. Thank you, sir.
This is the saddest moment in my tenure as Secretary General of the United Nations. I started this meeting of the Security Council addressing President Putin and telling him from the bottom of my heart, stop your troops from an offensive to Ukraine, give peace a chance, because too many people have already died. During the meeting, President Putin announced a special military operation in the Donbass and required the Ukrainian troops to lay down their arms. So in the present circumstances, I must change my appeal. And I must say, President Putin, in the name of humanity, bring your troops back to Russia. In the name of humanity, do not allow to start in Europe what could be the worst war since the beginning of the century, with consequences not only devastating for Ukraine, not only tragic for the Russian Federation, but with an impact we cannot even foresee in relation to their consequences for the global economy in a moment when we are emerging from the COVID, and so many developing countries absolutely need to have space for the recovery, which would be very, very difficult with the high prices of oil, with the end of exports of wheat from the Ukraine, and with rising interest rates caused by the instability in international markets. This conflict must stop now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General. You've just talked about consequences. I wonder if you could spell out some more what you think the consequences will be for Russia and for Ukraine and its people.
Well, it's clear that military action will be it will be happening in the territory of the Ukraine. And obviously, if they lead to a generalized war, it is difficult to forecast how dramatic it will be in the number of people who will die, in the number of people who will be displaced, in the number of people who will lose hope in relation to the future. It is also clear that the consequences for the Russian Federation will be very meaningful. It's not for me to comment on sanctions that are being implemented, but it's clear that there will be also consequences. But what is clear for me is that this war doesn't make any sense. It violates the principles of the Charter, and it causes, or will cause, if it doesn't stop, a level of suffering Europe has not known since at least the Balkanic crisis.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Pam Falk from CBS News. Is there anything the UN can do to get Russia back to the bargaining table at this point?
We can, of course, in my case, appeal. The Security Council is the body that has the powers given by the Charter to address this situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we have been listening in now to UN officials. That was the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres step up to the podium to take questions from reporters, to tell Russia to essentially back off from this. He also was saying that this war makes no sense right now. The Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations stepping up. Let's listen in.
Security Council chamber, the Russian war started against Ukraine. In fact, the war started in 2014. It's a historical embarrassment to the humanity and to this particular organization that has failed to take the necessary actions in the course of the last 8 years. I demanded in the Security Council that Ambassador Nebenzia of Russia relinquish his responsibilities as the chair, as the president of the Security Council, as a representative of a country that egregiously violated the Charter, that he pass his duties to someone in the Security Council who is capable to perform the duties of the President of the Council. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's meeting of the Security Council, where an appropriate draft resolution will be put to vote, and I call to everyone to vote in favor. The design of the United Nations is very faulty. You can ask an aggressor to abstain from vote at the stage of peaceful resolution under Chapter 6, but you cannot ask aggressor, believe it or not, to abstain from vote under Chapter 7 when the Council deals with the aggression. I have also asked the Secretary General of the United Nations to produce the copies of the decisions of the Security Council and the General Assembly dated 1991 that, in accordance with Article 4 of the Charter, welcome the desire of the Russian Federation to be a member of this organization. Thank you.
Ambassador, you were visibly emotional during this speech. You mentioned the fact that most of your speech was obsolete by the time you had the chance to read it. What is the message to the world at this moment? As we heard from Russia, the fact that an operation, a special operation in Donbass was launched, but we hear that is bombing and explosions in Kyiv, that special forces from the Black Sea started to enter Ukrainian territory. And personally, what's your feeling? You have family, you have people in Ukraine right now.
Well, it's a war. If we here in New York do not remember what war is, then go to the library and pull out the footage of the war. It means thousands and thousands of people killed, if not millions. And what I want from the world, I want the world to rally, after all, and defend the world from the aggression, from the Russian Federation. All right, it's late. We have to digest the information, we have to verify information, and we have to be here in the Security Council tomorrow morning.
Ambassador, just last question. At the end of the speech, the ambassador of Russia says that this wasn't an aggression against the Ukrainian people, but an aggression against those that were in power. Do you believe that this is a flat-out...
You can't be serious. Are you serious? You want me to dissect the crazy, lunatic semantics of a person whose president violates the Charter, whose president declared a war, and he's playing with words? And you'd ask me to interpret it? It's lunacy. It's lunacy. Absolutely.
Okay, the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations bristling at one of those reporters' questions there. As we continue to follow all this, I'm going to be bringing in Hal Kempfer yet again to react to some of this. Hal, What do you think is going through the minds? We heard those representatives from the Baltic states. What do you think they are imagining right now? Of course, they are on edge. But we also heard from the UN Secretary General and then, of course, the Ukrainian ambassador there. The United Nations right now, they held this meeting earlier today. They called this emergency meeting, Hal. While this was all taking place, reports of encroachments and incursions and invading forces. What is the UN's role here? Is it all for naught, or can they make a stand? They say they want to issue a resolution, but how far does that go?
Andrew, it's interesting. Obviously, the Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, they needed to make a strong statement. The way that Putin has framed the historical context, his kind of rambling view of how he feels all the areas around Russia that they should be under the Russian Federation. The way he framed that was obviously pointed directly at the Baltic states next, because if you look at when he says that Ukraine does not have that they're not a real nation or that they shouldn't be a nation state, well, the Baltic states also used to be part of the USSR, historically were part of the Russian Empire. So he's implying I don't know if you say implying, he's virtually stating that they're next. Of course, the Baltic states are members of NATO. So if he does something against the Baltic states, Article 5 kicks in which case all of NATO immediately gets involved. It's a very different thing. But obviously everyone wants to stop this in Ukraine. What I found interesting, and I was kind of scratching my head on this, was the Ukraine ambassador brings up some of the language as far as being part of the United Nations. And frankly, I haven't heard some of this. Some of this goes back to the resolution by the United Nations involving the Korean War back in 1950. It was interesting that North Korea invaded South Korea, which then was a very weak, anemic state, didn't have much of an ability to defend itself, invaded them. Of course, the U.S. was there, the U.S. was involved. But when that happened, the way that they got a United Nations vote to do that was that the Russians had basically boycotted or left the Security Council. So they literally weren't there to cast that veto as a permanent member. Of course, that was historically speaking, that was a mistake by the Russians to do that. But what it did was it allowed the United Nations to actually send forces under the UN flag to deal with that invasion by North Korea, and kept them there when that eventually led to the Chinese coming into that conflict as well. A very interesting sort of period of history. Interesting in that what we're looking at, what's going on here. Now, what he talked about was the fact that he talked about, are they eligible to be members? And I'm not a lawyer nor an international law lawyer, although I have done a lot of study and actually formal training in international law and certainly the law of war. But I'm kind of curious as to what the UN can do.
Yeah.
How much power do they have to essentially eject or in some way neutralize one of their own members? And I don't know.
Hal, just want to break some news here coming in from the White House. President Biden will deliver remarks tomorrow afternoon announcing the further consequences the United States and our allies and partners will impose on Russia for its unprovoked and unjustified attack on Ukraine. That's per a White House official coming into us via Fox News. We also know earlier today that the sanctions went back on Nord Stream 2 on the pipeline on the part of the United States. You'll remember early on in the Biden administration, I believe in January of 2021, it was almost one of the first moves the Biden administration made was that they relinquished the sanctions on Nord Stream 2. A lot of people had said that they might regret that move. Maybe they were regretting that move, that wasn't done sooner, but it was done today. I also want to put out the statement put out by President Biden. I'm going to put it on the screen for our viewers. I'm going to read it in part. The prayers of the entire world are with the people of Ukraine tonight as they suffer an unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring, and the United States and its allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable. Also, we know that tomorrow he will hold, I think, a virtual call with leaders of the G7 countries. Of course, Russia used to be a member of that allied bloc. It used to be called the G8. They were kicked out back in 2014 after their incursions into Crimea. I also want to put up a statement, excuse me, Hal, from NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. He says, "I strongly condemn Russia's reckless attack on Ukraine, which puts at risk countless civilian lives. This is a grave breach of international law and a serious threat to Euro-Atlantic security. Hashtag NATO allies will meet to address Russia's renewed aggression." Also, we're told that Fox is reporting there will be an unclassified briefing by phone for all U.S. senators tomorrow on Ukraine at 5 p.m. Eastern. Hal, what more can we do? What more can our allies and partners do to pressure Russia, to put pain on Russia, to maybe make them de-escalate? Right now, it doesn't seem like that is happening, of course.
I think tomorrow's sanctions regime, whatever they announce, will be very telling. I would expect a swift action on SWIFT, if you will, the international banking or the international financial transfer mechanism. I don't know if it'll be a complete shutdown of their ability to basically operate under SWIFT, but I do expect that something will be done within that arena to dramatically restrict the ability of Russian corporations, Russian individuals, certainly key Russian individuals and their family members from doing anything in the international sphere. I would not be surprised to see something done on the maritime domain, where perhaps Russian flag carriers or Russian owned ships may be detained in port for a considerable period of time. Some of this is a bit of a nuisance. There is a dollar cost that put to this. They also might block Russian flights from going to certain capital cities. There's a lot of things that I expect to see happen. One of the things, though, and it's rather gruesome, but we're in war. And war is tough business, all right? There's a lot of damage, there's a lot of destruction, there's a lot of death, and certainly a lot of suffering that occurs in war. One of the things that this has now moved into is we're beyond sanctions, we're beyond just pressure moves. The dynamics of what happens on the ground, the military force on force dynamics, how many tanks we take out, how many or I should say the Ukraine forces take out, how many BMPs, BTRs, all those other things are out there. This is going to determine a lot. And I go back to that basic vulnerability the Russians have, which is they don't have a depth to their forces. They've got somewhere around 65-75% of their operational ground combat units already committed. And I'm not the only person out there who's analyzed this that says the longer this goes on and the higher the attrition, the worse this gets for Putin, because it becomes unsustainable. And I think over time that's going to happen. This will start out as a high intensity mechanized ground war with a lot of air and everything else. Once this goes into an insurgency, once this goes into the urban areas, the advantages that Russia has start to dissipate greatly. I'm not saying you can't use tanks and armored vehicles in urban terrain. Yes, you can. But they lose maneuver space, their speed doesn't matter, and they're very vulnerable to attack. And that's where when armored forces move into that sort of territory, whether it's the suburbs or major urban areas, that's where you're going to see a tremendous amount of casualties, a tremendous amount of damage. And if there's nothing to back that up, if there isn't that second string, if they can't relieve those units, if they can't replace the personnel, they can't do all those things, over time, those units become combat ineffective. The whole thing bogs down. Once that thing bogs down, And once it becomes a massive insurgency, Ukraine may have a bit of an advantage. Once they simply become an insurgent force, a guerrilla force, if you will, an unconventional force, basically killing Russian personnel and taking out their vehicles and doing all these other things that go with war, it may shift dramatically. And I look at this and I say, if that happens, if that occurs, you may see enough backblast politically, economically, and socially to Russia where there could be the forces coalesce for a regime change. This, that I don't see how that would go any other way.
Yeah.
If that scenario occurs.
And Hal, we're just having a live look there at Maidan Square. It's about 6:30 on a very early Thursday morning. I just want to reiterate, and you made this very clear, that U.S. troops are shoring up our eastern flank in our allies, NATO ally countries. Right now, there are no American troops in Ukraine. That is not on the table. President Biden has said that as much. So I just wanted to make sure we got that out. I know some people probably don't think it needs to be said, but others might think it does need to be said. I also just want to put up some of the video here that we had of and apologize for the audio there, but that's the address that he gave on Russian state television earlier today, and he said he does not want to occupy Ukraine. He essentially was saying that they want to go in there, and his words, denazify Ukraine. Maybe you can help us tease that out. I'm not entirely sure what he meant by that. But that is what he did today. He declared a special military operation. He said, our analysis has concluded that our confrontation with these Ukrainian forces is inevitable. He said dedicated military officers will conduct their duties with professionalism and courage. He says we cannot tolerate the threat that emanates from modern Ukraine. Hal, also back to your point on more sanctions. Many lawmakers are issuing statements right now saying that they want SWIFT on the table. They want to cut Russia off from the international banking system. One just came in from Senator Marsha Blackburn. Others are coming in, I believe, from Marco Rubio as well. They want that on the table.
They absolutely do, and I expect to see something happening tomorrow. The pressure on the White House, the Biden administration, to basically go all in is incredible back there. Look, Capitol Hill has been a buzz today with a lot of strong language on sanctions, and certainly with what's happened tonight, the manner of which it's happened, and the fact that there's explosions in Kyiv and other major cities far away from eastern Ukraine. That changes things. I mean, frankly, in the psyche of European capitals, to have a European capital being attacked like this has a gut feel. And I think that's going to translate into our ability to coalesce this, not just NATO, but all European nations into helping Ukraine. We're going to be sending a lot of aid. There's going to be humanitarian aid. There's going to be a lot of other things going into Ukraine. We have a big border, NATO, I should say, by we, has a big border that they're dealing with. You got NATO members to the north, the Baltic states, but you also got this, Poland, Romania right there. We're bolstering up all those countries, but we also have a border where we can ship humanitarian aid. And frankly, we've been shipping military aid. We've been shipping very lethal military aid, anti-tank missiles, anti-aircraft missiles, things like that, man-portable. The reason I say that man-portable piece, and the reason I bring that up is this potentially devolves into an insurgency. The ability to wield weapons like this in terms of small light infantry units becomes very, very important. That's how they attack. They don't have huge tank formations in an insurgency. What you have is a lot of light infantry out there doing things, looking for vulnerabilities, looking for units that are separated or units that are badly positioned, and taking advantage of them. That's what's going to happen. And I think you're going to see an increased flow of materials going into Ukraine for as long as there is a Ukraine government. And then if Russia ends up occupying the whole country, I imagine there's going to be folks who are very, very accomplished in the covert arts.
Yeah.
In terms of helping Ukraine as best they can in that regard.
Yeah, Kyiv is a city of 2.9 million people, and so They are on pins and needles early this morning. Hal, also we were talking about, or in earlier conversations this week, where in the event that the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian president need to flee, where would they seek refuge and exile? We have been talking about possibly Poland. Also, we were talking about the mettle of Russian troops, about their willingness to engage in this conflict, their morale to be all in. Do they feel this is their cause celeb? So still some questions on that. Of course, we have heard time and time again, the Ukrainian people, they want to defend their sovereign territory tooth and nail, and we've been, seeing pictures of civilian forces training and the like. So that will be interesting as well. I know you have to go very, very soon here, but we're getting daybreak now in Kyiv. It looks to be quite overcast. And we're hearing reports of explosions in many of these major cities. No civilian flights over the airspace of Ukraine. What do you think we can expect in the next hour, 2 hours, several hours?
I think what we're going to see is we're going to see more explosions, hear more explosions. I think at some point we're going to lose communications. I think at some point, whether it's a cyber attack or whatever, we're going to have a period of darkness. And then we're going to be looking at a lot of satellite photos. There's tremendous commercial satellite photo capability. We'll be getting that. We'll be getting a lot of very more detailed, a lot of very interesting but more detailed statements coming from the Pentagon and from other official sources, as they will know what's going on. And we're going to hear more about that. And, initially the government would fall back to, Western, the more Western region of Ukraine. But I think eventually you're going to see the government maybe have to set up a government in exile type of thing. Again, I'm going back to World War II when I'm talking about things like this, a government in exile that operate in Poland. And then you have this massive insurgency. And frankly, I don't know what's going through Putin's mind on this, because all the reports coming out on the Russian forces is that morale is pretty bad. In fact, some of the basic things like accounting for your forces, there's a report that in Belarus, they actually left soldiers at a train station, and it wasn't the soldiers were trying to desert or anything. They just got left because nobody was taking account. It was a number of soldiers. That sort of incompetence at the small unit level, just keeping track of your personnel, that tells me a lot. That's a big indicator that they've got some very fundamental problems. It's one thing to line up a bunch of tanks on the border and look impressive. It's another thing to go out there and operate as a maneuver unit. And this is not the Soviet Union. Even with all the improvements they've made, this is not the old Soviet Union. This isn't the same standards. And a lot of those conscripts, poorly led, mistreated. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, this is not 2014. They are motivated. They're fighting for their homeland. And frankly, I think they're going to put up a heck of a fight for every square inch of Ukraine. And over time, you may see them counterattacking and actually eliminating some of those battalions that are coming down. I fully expect something like that. And as those forces are further attrited and Russia's ability to pay for this war is gravely degraded as well, I think we're going to hit a tipping point. There's going to be a tipping point inside Russia, and there's going to be a tipping point in the war ahead. But it's going to be horrific. Yeah. I just want, brace yourself. This is not Iraq. This is not even Afghanistan. It's not even Chechnya. It's definitely not Georgia. It's going to be horrific. The number of casualties are going to be stunning, but that's what this type of warfare is.
And not to mention how the incoming humanitarian refugee crisis that this war will precipitate, spilling into neighboring countries. That has been on the radar of many, especially AIDS groups and other party governments who are expecting a large refugee problem after this in the event that many Ukrainians will have to flee as well if Russian forces do occupy large parts of Ukraine. And so we will be looking out for all of that. This is the first major escalation and confrontation in Europe in 30 years, going back to the Balkan Wars, but also really in the last 80 years since post-World War II. And you were talking about a failure of imagination, that many people in Europe weren't around then. The people who were around then, that population is growing much, much smaller and is diminishing in size. And so just the sheer comprehension of war on the European continent is really incomprehensible to most.
But by the way, I might want to mention, when Putin refers to that Nazi thing, yes, there are neo-Nazis in Ukraine. There's neo-Nazis in Russia, too. There are neo-Nazis. Zelensky's Jewish, all right? So that's kind of, it's all disinformation. But the one thing I would point out is, yes, in World War II, when the Nazis overran Ukraine, Ukraine had enough of Stalin, all right? They were tired of him. And a large chunks of the Ukrainian population were happily occupied by Germany for a while. And then German practices alienated them, and then, the war changed and it all shifted back. But that tells you where Putin's mind is. He's thinking in World War II terms, and that tells you his mindset and how he justifies this. But thank you, Andrew. I've got to go. I have to talk to a Fox affiliate, part of the great Fox family. So anyway, I'm actually talking on KHON, so I'll say aloha to you.
Thank you, Hal.
And,
yes, we'll talk again for sure. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Andrew.
Yep.
All right. See you.
Okay, right now we do want to get a report from Fox News foreign correspondent Trey Yingst. He filed this report. He's in Kyiv right now. Let's hear from Trey Yingst after reports of explosions have been heard in the Ukrainian capital. All right, and we apologize there. It looks like that report does not have audio. We're going to work on getting that for you. Right now, though, let's show you some of these live looks from Kyiv itself, where reports like Trey is about to tell us were happening. There are reports of explosions not only in Kyiv, but also port cities on the Black Sea like Mariupol, Odessa, and the like. Also a major other city near the Belarusian border known as Kharkiv. And so right now we're working on getting a lot of these live looks for you here. We're working on getting a lot of statements. We're working on bringing more experts and officials. We are going to leave this up for you, take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. This is Andrew Kraft, and thank you for being with us right now. It is 10 minutes to 7 a.m. in the morning there in Kyiv, Ukraine, and we have two Live Now looks from the European capital there, the Ukrainian capital. This is a major European capital. It has about 2.9 million people. Well, now there are reports of explosions there, not only there, but also in other parts of Ukraine, especially in Luhansk and Donetsk down in the east, but also in some of these other port cities near Crimea, Mariupol, Odessa, and the like. Right now, we are going to be giving you all of the latest about what exactly is happening. We have a new statement in from White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki updating us on the president's calls and movements. She says POTUS was briefed on a secure call this evening by Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, Chairman Milley, and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan about the ongoing attack on Ukraine by Russian military forces. So right now, the president still awake, still making calls, still meeting with his advisors. We also know before the UN Security Council meeting, he spoke on the phone with UN ambassador from the United States, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, and Jake Sullivan about what exactly was going to happen at the Security Council meeting. We've played a large majority of that live as it happened. We're going to do that a little bit later. We also know President Biden will be hosting a call tomorrow with leaders of the G7 countries. Those include Italy, Germany, Japan, Canada, the UK, France, and the like. And so right now, that is on the schedule for tomorrow. And then, of course, we are also getting reporting that President Biden will deliver remarks tomorrow to the American people, announcing the further consequences the United States has already and will impose on Russia for its unprovoked and unjustified attack on Ukraine. You remember on Monday, sanctions went out to all entities there in those separatist regions in the east known as Luhansk and Donetsk. Also, we learned that more sanctions went out on Tuesday, more sanctions went out today, and of course, more actions, more consequences will be going out tomorrow as well. We just want to put up both of these Live Now looks. These are the only live pictures we have here out in Ukraine. And of course, there has been some reporting to suggest that explosions have been reported and monitored in many cities, but including in Kyiv. Blasts heard there in that Ukrainian capital there. This is a very large cosmopolitan, metropolitan city. And so we are going to be monitoring these shots to see if we see any of those blasts or hear any of those blasts. Right now, Fox News is reporting that President Biden just spoke to Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy. Right now, Peter Doocy, Fox News White House correspondent, has confirmed that news with a senior White House administration official that President Biden just wrapped up a call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. They have been going back and forth on the phone for about the last seemingly like 2 weeks. They're always on the phone, updating each other about the United States posture, offering our support, and vice versa. Right now, let's keep these Live Now looks up of these two shots of Kyiv as we work to gather more information. But this story is very fluid. There has not been war in Europe in about 30 years since the Balkan Wars of the 90s, and of course of the major world conflict, World War II, about 80 years ago. And so right now we are working on getting you the information live, raw, and unfiltered, and making sure you are up to date. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. This is Andrew Kraft. We actually just got another Live Now look out of the city of Mariupol. It's about 10 minutes until 7 a.m. on a very early Thursday morning there. You can see the skies are quite gray, quite overcast. We also have these Live Now looks out of Kyiv in Ukraine as well. I want to show you just some social media generated video of some of these explosions and blasts that were seen and heard near the city of Kharkiv. Now, that city is about very, very close to the Belarusian border where many Russian troops were stationed. Let's take a look at this video right now. Okay, and I think this is a kind of a time-lapse video. This is coming to us via EA Integration Group, via Storyful right now. And from what I'm told, you're gonna there you see it right there. You can see some of those explosions, those yellow flashes of light. This is near the city of Kharkiv, which is near the Belarusian border in the cities, in the country's northeast. This is not far from the Belarusian or the Russian border, where hundreds and thousands of troops have been amassed for some time. We now know that Russian forces are on the move. Of course, now and from this video, we see the evidence of some of these explosions. I do want to show another Live Now look as well of some more social media video where smoke is seen over the skies and explosions are heard. Let's take a look at this new video as well. And there you can see some of the remaining and remnants of smoke from possibly some of this artillery, some of this shelling. I believe that is over the city of Mariupol. That is on the coast of the Black Sea. Just to put up a map, because I know some of you might be wondering about Ukrainian geography at this point in time. Let's put this up for our viewers. Okay, you can see Luhansk and Donetsk, those eastern regions, those separatist regions. By the stroke of a pen, Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday signed away their sovereignty and made them independent republics. You can see also the troop buildup on the border with Ukraine. And so that is what we were hearing earlier today, that they will be invading both from the south amphibiously, from the east via land, and from the north there via Belarus into Ukraine. And of course, Kyiv is not far from that at all, and we still have some of those live looks as well. Like I said, though, before, we were trying to work out some of those audio issues with Fox News Foreign Affairs correspondent Trey Yingst, who's in Kyiv. Let's hear his report that he just filed. This is not live, but this is after blasts and explosions were seen and heard in Kyiv.
We are hearing explosions in the capital of Kiev right now. This is that coordinated attack that for weeks Western intelligence analysts warned could take place. The explosions in the Ukrainian capital started shortly after reports were coming in of explosions in the east, and after those what appeared to be taped remarks by Russian President Putin finished up in Moscow. One of the places in the eastern part of Ukraine that we know took a direct hit during these initial airstrikes was a small town called Kramatorsk, and it was a town that we actually landed in over the weekend when we were on the front lines with Ukrainian troops. There's a lot of military equipment there, and it was used as a base in this part of very close to the front line. The fact, though, that there are explosions in the Ukrainian capital escalates this event and this Russian invasion into Ukraine to a level that analysts feared could expand to a much larger conflict between the two sides. We are hearing explosions.
All right. Thank you so much to Trey Yinks, who's been doing some incredible reporting. Also, earlier tonight, if you haven't found out by now, Russian state television carried an address by Russian President Vladimir Putin, essentially announcing to the Russian people that an invasion will be taken forward, will be moved forward. And so I just want to show you some of that. And I apologize there about that audio, but Putin was really essentially giving the backing and the rationale for why this is happening. Also to note that Russian media says this video address was pre-recorded on the 21st of February. That is coming from independent reports in Russia, that this speech about the beginning of the military operation was recorded on February the 21st. So a couple of days ago. That's very, very interesting, as you know, as kind of some of these pre-recorded videos, propaganda videos, and the like are used as a pretext to justify invasion. That is the Russian playbook. Right now, I just want to read to you, this was in Russian. Of course, we didn't have the translation, but I want to read to you some of the statements Putin made. He essentially said that experts say an empire of lies has been created inside the United States. It is hard to disagree. He said dedicated military officers will conduct their duties with professionalism and courage. He says that we cannot tolerate the threat that emanates from modern Ukraine. About NATO expansion, he says, for U.S. and its allies, it is so-called Russia deterrence policy. For our country, it's an existential issue. He says he says Ukraine is having modern foreign weaponry pumped into it. This is an existential threat to our Russian statehood and sovereignty. So right now, just wanted to make sure you saw some of this video here. And we are getting more and more live looks from Ukraine that we are going to put on the screen for you at the moment. Thankfully, we do have some type of window into the country right now. And let's see some of these live now looks. You can see there, and I believe this is all in Kyiv at the moment. Bear with me while I put all these up for you. So now we have 3 live now looks, and I just want to make sure they all are in Kyiv at the moment. I believe they are. And yes, they are. So right now you can see daybreak, almost 7 o'clock on the dot there on this Thursday morning in Ukraine as the country is facing down an invasion on their eastern flank, on their eastern border with Russia. Troops amassed to their north on the border with Belarus. And we are getting still reports of explosions, blasts heard in and around some of these major cities, including Kyiv, including the city of Mariupol, the city of Odessa, Kharkiv. We have a live now look as well out of Mariupol. Right now, we are going to be working to get, and we just lost that shot, we're working to get more and more experts, reporters, and the like to join us here on the stream to offer context. We're going to be joined by Hal Kempfer a little bit later on tonight. So stick with us here, live, raw, and unfiltered, as we continue to cover Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Okay, welcome back here, and to all of our new viewers, it is the top of the hour, 10 o'clock here Mountain Time, midnight on the East Coast, 7 in the morning on a Thursday morning, a very gray, dark, cloudy, overcast Thursday morning in the country of Ukraine as an invasion by Russian forces has begun. Right now, we do want to put up yet again more of these Live Now looks. The largest picture there is in Kyiv. The lower right hand of your screen there is in Kyiv. And then I believe the other upper right hand screen is in Kyiv as well. We are getting more and more information right now. President Biden tweeting just a couple of minutes ago saying that, quote, Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring, and the United States and its allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable. That, of course, comes on the heels that President Biden will be making a statement tomorrow announcing more punitive actions in concert with our allies. We also know that he just got off the phone, according to Fox News' reporting, with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy. He and Biden just spoke on the phone, according to Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy, that this was not a call to discuss what had been reported earlier this week, that the U.S. was actively trying to help Zelenskyy leave Ukraine. Remember, that is something that is being talked about right now, that what will Zelenskyy, his family, members of the Ukrainian cabinet, Ukrainian members of parliament, where will they go? Where will they seek refuge in the event of a Russian occupation of Kyiv? And where will they seek exile? Right now, we're also getting more news from Zelenskyy himself. Speaking of, we're getting this in right now. He just put out a video on his Instagram account, and I'm going to read from a very, very rough translation. The big headline of this right now, though, is he is announcing martial law. He says, this morning, Putin announced a special military operation in the Donbas. Russia has carried out strikes on our military infrastructure and our border guards. Explosions were heard in many cities of Ukraine. We impose martial law throughout Ukraine. That is a very, very significant escalation and announcement by Ukrainian President Zelenskyy to the Ukrainian people, the country of Ukraine under martial law. Joining me right now via Zoom, we're just going to keep these live pictures up. We're going to still talk to our sources, our reporters on the ground, Ukrainian Americans, experts, and the like. This is a very fast-moving situation. I'm being joined by my friend and colleague here at Live Now from Fox, Daytona Everett, with the latest. Daytona, your reaction as we just got this in, Zelenskyy putting an Instagram video out declaring martial law in his country.
Andrew, we have been waiting on this announcement from President Zelenskyy for a while now. Obviously, the idea of a war was imminent for the past couple of days. I mean, we've been seeing these developments come in every single step of the way here on Live Now, every development. But this seems to be the official move here. And we've heard from President Zelenskyy trying to keep the peace, trying to kind of steward that sentiment for the people out in Ukraine right now, who many are fearful. Most of that fear coming from Kyiv itself. I mean, we've talked to Lucas Tomlinson, who's been in Lviv, which is about 6 hours away from Kyiv, and hasn't really felt much of the pressure. But now Kyiv, really, really the focal point on that. So hearing this from President Zelenskyy is not surprising, and we all knew that this was going to be coming at one point. President Biden and President Zelenskyy maintaining communication through all of this, and the foreign minister for Ukraine also being quite outspoken. And you'll remember, Andrew, the peace has always been the main priority from Ukraine, although that's not what we're hearing from the Russian side of things. Putin saying that Ukraine has been the aggressor this entire time, which clearly is quite untrue. But Zelenskyy, you can imagine, he's going to try to continue to keep the peace, keep everyone as, I guess, at bay as possible. when explosions are going off in your own country, you can only imagine how some of those civilians are feeling at this point in time. But Andrew, major developments coming in tonight, and you really have to feel for the people out there, because there's a lot of unknowns at this point in time.
You're right. This is a very, very new and fluid situation. I want to put up the latest tweet from Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. The world must act immediately. Future of Europe and the world is at stake. To-do list. Devastating sanctions on Russia now, including SWIFT. Fully isolate Russia by all means in all formats. Weapons and equipment for Ukraine, financial assistance, and humanitarian assistance. And of course, Daytona, we had been hearing from so many of the people that we have spoken to that this will precipitate a very large refugee crisis, as many Ukrainians no doubt will be forced to flee from their country. Right now, I do want to put up full for you. This is Maidan Square in Kyiv, in the center of the capital. We are getting reports that some sirens and some alarms have gone out ongoing. Let's just listen in right now to that in on the heels and following the announcement from President Zelenskyy declaring martial law in the country. Okay, it looks like we didn't hear any ourselves. We're going to keep monitoring that shot there. Still on the line with Daytona Everett here as we continue to monitor all these developments. Daytona, I wanted to read more from the translation from that Instagram video Zelenskyy just put out. He said, "Today you need peace of mind. If possible, stay at home. We work. The army works. The whole security and defense sector works. I, the National Security and Defense Council, and the Cabinet of Ministers will be in constant contact with you. I will be in touch again soon. Don't panic. We are strong. We will win, everyone, because we are Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine." That is so strong, so powerful to his people, the Ukrainian people, who no doubt have really no idea what is going to happen and are likely very, very scared this early Thursday morning there.
Yeah, he's trying to lead his country right now, Andrew. I mean, in the midst of chaos and mayhem, and like I said before, the unknowns, the exact strategy of President Putin is unknown right now. As much as we think we know from history and past, like there are so many developments and so many changes that have been made since former wars, and cyber attacks are one of those. And we've been speaking with cybersecurity experts about what that could look like. And we've already seen attacks on the local banks, on state and local government sites. So what could ensue in the coming days and weeks, not only in Ukraine, but globally, will be what we need to watch here moving forward.
Okay, Daytona Everett, thank you so much. We're going to replay for some of our viewers the UN Security Council meeting that really just wrapped up about an hour ago. In case you might have missed it, we're going to play those remarks from the meeting. We're going to keep up some more of these Live Now looks inside of Ukraine in many of these cities that we have kind of an eye into, a window into. So right now, let's hear from some of these UN officials, starting off with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, Excellencies, I want to reaffirm what I expressed this morning in the meeting of the General Assembly. But of course, it wouldn't make any sense to bother you reading again the same text that I'm sure you are all aware of. In between, during the day, a number of events took place, and with your permission, Mr. President, I would like to ask Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo to be able to brief you on those events. But simultaneously, the day was full of rumors and indications that an offensive against the Ukraine was imminent. In the recent past, there were several situations with similar indications, similar rumors. And I never believed in them, convinced that nothing serious would happen. I was wrong. And I would like not to be wrong again today. So, if indeed an operation is being prepared, I have only one thing to say from the bottom of my heart. President Putin, stop your troops from attacking the Ukraine. Give peace a chance. Too many people have already died. Thank you, Mr. President.
Я благодарю генерального секретаря за его вступительные замечания. И сейчас я предоставляю слово госпоже Розмари ДиКарло.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier today, the so-called authorities of the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics requested military assistance from the Russian Federation. Also today, the Ukrainian authorities declared a nationwide state of emergency and announced other related defense and security measures, including the mobilization of reservists. Throughout the day, we've seen disturbing reports of continued heavy shelling across the contact line and civilian and military casualties. There are also reports of the repeated targeting of civilian infrastructure. This evening, different media are carrying reports of an ongoing large-scale military buildup and on military columns moving towards Ukraine. The Russian Federation has also reportedly shut airspace to civilian aircraft near the border with Ukraine. The United Nations cannot verify any of these reports, but if these developments were confirmed, they would greatly aggravate an already dangerous situation. The Ukrainian authorities are also reporting a new large-scale cyber attack targeting several state and financial institutions. Mr. President, President Zelenskyy earlier this evening called for continued diplomacy. Separately, President Putin also spoke about his continued readiness to engage in dialogue. We encourage such efforts, even at this late hour. UN staff remain on the ground to provide humanitarian assistance to the people of Ukraine. We are committed to staying and delivering. All parties must ensure their safety and security. Respect for international humanitarian law and international human rights law is also paramount. We cannot predict exactly what will happen in the coming hours and days in Ukraine. What is clear is the unacceptably high cost in human suffering and destruction of an escalation. The people of Ukraine want peace, and I'm certain the people of Russia want peace. We must do everything in our power to ensure that peace prevails. Thank you, Mr. President.
Я благодарю госпожу ДиКарло за ее брифинг, и сейчас предоставляю слово тем членам Совета, которые хотели бы выступить с заявлениями. И первым я предоставляю слово представителю Албании.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, this is the fourth time the Council is meeting in Ukraine in a matter of weeks. Every time we meet, reality on the ground confirms, bit by bit, what some of us have been anticipating. Russia has been saying one thing and doing its contrary. We were told troops were retreating when they only have increased. We were told to stop hysteria since troops were in Russian territory. No longer. They are invading a neighbor, unprovoked, with false pretexts, false narratives, and fabricated news. Every development unfolding in the last 48 hours confirms, to us and to the world, that Russian worries have nothing to do with its security, that its anxieties are not linked to NATO enlargement, that this issue is not a confrontation between Russia and the West. This is a confrontation between Russia and international law, the UN Charter that it deliberately has chosen to ignore, a confrontation between a hegemonistic vision and the rules-based world order. Dear colleagues, it's not about Russia's concern, it's about Russia's appetite. The Ukrainians are facing another aggression just because they dare to exist, because they have chosen to be independent, because they have opted for democracy. Dear colleagues, this is a dark hour not only for Ukraine, but for the entire international community as we witness with trepidation the progression of a pure act of aggression carefully planned and cold-bloodedly being executed. We called and hoped for a back down of the Russian Federation from this senseless, destructive and self-destructive action. We repeat the same call for Russia to stop, to reflect, to reverse its illegal decisions, to withdraw from this senseless madness, to de-escalate, not to push towards precipice. Several mechanisms are in place and various proposals have been made, including by President Zelenskyy, whose calls remain unanswered. Diplomacy is like hope. It dies last. But for it to work, it must be seized, not ignored, as the Secretary General just called for here. We call on the fellow members of the Security Council to rally in support of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Russia has been warned repeatedly that they will be alone in this foolishness, that they will be responsible for the innocent lives lost, including Russians maybe, and for the destruction caused in the heart of Europe in the 21st century. If they choose to continue to execute their plans, as everything indicates, they will bear not only the consequences of the war, but also the historical blame and shame of invading a neighboring country when its responsibility as a big country, as a permanent member of the Security Council, calls for it to work and help preserve peace and security, not to torpedo it. We reiterate our support to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders and territorial waters. In concluding, I welcome the presence of the permanent representative of Ukraine to this meeting. I would like to convey to him, to the Ukrainian government and people, that at this most critical moment in their history, they are not alone, and we stand firm in full solidarity with them for their rights to be free and choose who they want to be. I thank you.
Я благодарю представителя Албании за его заявление, и сейчас предоставляю слово представителю Соединенных Штатов.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Secretary General. Thank you for your strong stance and your powerful remarks today at the General Assembly and for your remarks tonight. Colleagues, a few moments ago I spoke to President Biden, who asked me to convey in the strongest possible terms his and our steadfast support for Ukraine and support for the urgent meeting this Council has convened tonight. Furthermore, he asked me to share that the United States and our allies and partners will continue to respond to Russia's actions with unity, with clarity, and with conviction. We are here tonight because we believe, along with Ukraine, that a full-scale further invasion into Ukraine by Russia is imminent. Tonight, We're seeing the Russians close airspace, move troops into Donbass, and move forces into combat-ready positions. This is a perilous moment, and we're here for one reason and one reason only: to ask Russia to stop, return to your borders, send your troops and your tanks and your planes back to their barracks and hangars, and send your diplomats to the negotiating table. Back away from the brink before it is too late. Last week, the United States informed this Council and the world about what we expected to see unfold. We said that Russia would manufacture a pretext for an attack. We have since seen numerous false flag events staged along the lines of contact in Donbass. We said Russia would theatrically convene emergency meetings at the highest levels of the Russian government. We all saw this on Monday with the state televised Security Council meeting held by President Putin, an orchestrated moment in which the Russian government decided to recognize as, and I quote, independent states, unquote, sovereign territory of Ukraine controlled by Russia's proxies since 2014. They literally violated Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity on live television before the world. We said that false proclamations would come declaring Russia would need to defend Russian speakers in Ukraine. We got that and much more from President Putin's speech on Monday and during the speech of the Russian ambassador in the General Assembly today. No one could have predicted just how dangerous, inciting, and far-reaching President Putin's speech would be, with Putin arguing for taking the world back in time to an era of empires and colonies. Finally, we said the attack would come next, that we could expect communications to be jammed, cyber attacks to shut down key Ukrainian institutions. Last week, we attributed to Russia denial of service attacks against Ukrainian banks, and we saw similar activity this morning targeting government sites as well. And in the last few hours, we have received very concerning reports of destructive malware placed on hundreds of computers and executed on at least some. After that, we said would come the bombs and missiles, the soldiers and the tanks. Already soldiers have been deployed to the occupied region of Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here tonight because we believe the rest is imminent.
We've been listening in to Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. I just want you all to have a listen to this right now. There are air raid sirens going off in Maidan Square. We just heard them. Take a listen right now. And I might have just missed them, but they are ongoing right now. This is after Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy has initiated martial law. You can see some traffic moving there in the square. It's about 7:30 in the morning there on a very early gray Thursday morning. Let's just listen back in as we give you more updates on the Russian invasion of Ukraine tonight. Okay, if we do hear some of those sirens, we will bring them to you here. Hopefully we'll catch them, but I heard them just a little bit ago. We want to get them to you live, though. If we get them again, we know they're going to be going on throughout the early morning hours there in Kyiv. I just want to update everyone on some of the statements that have been coming in, some of the phone calls that have been made, some of the news that will take place tomorrow. Right now, I want to read to you a statement Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy put out in addition to that Instagram video he posted on his account saying, quote, "This morning, Russia launched a new military operation against our state. This is an unjustified, deceitful, and cynical invasion. There are strikes on military and other important defense facilities. Border units are under attack. The situation in the Donbas has degraded. The armed forces of Ukraine, all special and law enforcement agencies of the state are on alert. The National Security and Defense Council is working in an emergency mode. Martial law will be imposed." He says civilians of Ukraine should stay at home. Warn your loved ones about what is happening. Take care of those who need help. All thoughts and prayers are with our soldiers. Glory to Ukraine. That was the message coming to from President Vladimir Zelenskyy to the Ukrainian people, to his citizens. He just got off the phone with President Biden. The White House put out a readout of that call. It goes as follows. President Zelenskyy reached out to me tonight, and we just finished speaking. I condemned this unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. We're going to put a tweet up on the screen. The president just put that out as well. He says, I briefed him on the steps we are taking to rally international condemnation, including tonight at the UN Security Council. So we just got in this tweet here. Right now, we're also learning that President Biden will be speaking tomorrow with announcements on more punitive measures taken against the Russian Federation. That will be at noon Eastern time tomorrow. Those remarks from President Biden. Right now, we are getting some reporting from Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy saying that essentially what will President Biden say tomorrow? Well, a senior administration official tells Peter Doocy that there will be some significant ones in there, meaning sanctions. This official disputes some reporting out there that this is the full scale of sanctions because there are basically endless opportunities with something like economic sanctions. So we know that there will be more sanctions tomorrow. Let's put up, we have 3 live now looks for you inside the country of Ukraine. The large shot there with that beautiful Orthodox cathedral. I believe that is St. Nicholas Orthodox Cathedral. That's in Kyiv. And then the lower right hand of your screen, Maidan Square in Kyiv. And then the upper right hand of your screen is Mariupol. That is I believe, a port city on the Black Sea that has also been experiencing shelling, explosions, loud blasts as well. Right now, though, we do want to play out for you yet again some more of the UN Security Council and their emergency meeting today, including some of the back and forth between Russian ambassador and the Ukrainian ambassador. Let's play that for you right now.
Не буду повторять сказанное мною утром в Генеральной Ассамблее. Могу лишь с сожалением констатировать по итогам дня, что наши сигналы Киева о необходимости прекращения провокаций против Луганской и Донецкой народных республик не были услышаны. Похоже, что у наших украинских коллег, которые в последнее время активно вооружают и подзуживают ряд государств, не исчезало заблуждение о том, что с благословения западных кураторов они могут добиться военного решения проблемы Донбасса. Иначе сложно объяснить существенную интенсификацию обстрелов и диверсионных актов на территории республик. СММ ОБСЕ зафиксировал за истекшие сутки почти 2000 случаев нарушения режима прекращения огня, в том числе почти 1500 взрывов. Дончане и луганчане по-прежнему вынуждены укрываться в подвалах. Продолжается наплыв беженцев в Россию. Одним словом, характер провокации вооруженных сил Украины не изменился. Вы этого замечать не хотите, повторяя украинской басни о том, что дончане чуть ли не сами себя обстреливают. Удивляет, что возрастающие страдания жителей Донбасса никак не трогают наших западных коллег. В ходе целого дня сегодняшних дебатов в Генассамблее у вас для них не нашлось слов сочувствия и сострадания. Такое впечатление, что эти 4 миллионов человек для вас словно и не существует. Я хотел бы напомнить о том, что принцип суверенитета и территориальной целостности государств, в нарушении которого применительно к Украине нас сегодня обвиняли, согласно Декларации о принципах международного права, касающихся дружественной связи между народами, принятой в 1970 году, должен неукоснительно соблюдаться в отношении государств, я цитирую, соблюдающих в своих практических действиях принцип равноправия и самоопределения народов и вследствие этого имеющих правительство, представляющие без различия расы, вероисповедания и цвета кожи весь народ, проживающий на данной территории. Конец цитаты. Сегодняшнее правительство Украины таковым, конечно же, не является. Ведь трагедия Украины началась как раз после нелегитимного майданного переворота в 2014 году, когда вместо диалога с русскоязычными жителями Украины новая власть обрушила на них пушки и самолеты. Информации и свидетельств на этот счет предостаточно, однако наши западные партнеры предпочитали их не замечать. Мы постарались вчера и сегодня, и позавчера и сегодня объяснить вам логику принятых руководством России решений о признании ЛНР и ДНР. Акцентировали необходимость обеспечения там мира и безопасности. Однако вы нас услышать не хотели и не хотите. Для вас, жители Донбасса, исключительно разменная монета в геополитической игре направлена на ослабление России и продвижение блока НАТО к ее границам. Для нас же это женщины, дети и старики, 8 лет прячущиеся от украинских обстрелов и провокаций. Для нас это и украинский народ, страдающий под гнетом майданной власти. В этом разница наших подходов. Не сменив геополитическую оптику, вы нас никогда не поймете. Но зато нам бесконечно благодарны те, ради кого принимались упомянутые мной решения, те, о ком вы не вспоминали все эти 8 лет, называя их исключительно пророссийскими сепаратистами и террористами. И для нас это самое главное. Хотел бы вновь повторить, что корень сегодняшнего кризиса вокруг Украины в действиях самой Украины, занимавшейся многолетним саботажем своих прямых обязательств по Минскому комплексу мер. Еще на прошлой неделе существовала надежда на то, что в Киеве одумаются и все-таки выполнят то, под чем подписались в 2015 году. Для этого прежде всего был нужен прямой диалог с Донецком и Луганском. Однако очередное подтверждение неготовности Украины к такому диалогу, к шагам по предоставлению Донбассу особого статуса, предусмотренным Минскими соглашениями, причем с поддержкой этой позиции западными покровителями, окончательно убедило нас в том, что мы просто не имеем права заставлять жителей Донбасса страдать и дальше. Поскольку, как я уже сказал, украинские провокации против донбассцев не только не прекратились, но и интенсифицировались, руководство ЛНР и ДНР обратилось к нам с просьбой оказать военную поддержку в соответствии с двусторонними договорами о сотрудничестве, заключенными одновременно с их признанием. Это логичный шаг, являющийся следствием действий украинского режима. В ходе этого заседания президент России Путин обратился с обращением, в котором он сообщил, что принял решение о специальной военной операции на Донбассе. Мы не знаем всех деталей сегодня, но кратко хочу вам сообщить, что из его тезисов следует, что оккупация Украины в наши планы не входит. Цель этой спецоперации — защиты людей, которые на протяжении 8 лет подвергаются издевательствам, геноциду со стороны киевского режима. И для этого мы будем стремиться к демилитаризации и денацификации Украины, а также преданию суду тех, кто совершил многочисленные кровавые преступления против мирных жителей, в том числе граждан Российской Федерации. Это решение было принято в соответствии со статьей 51 Устава ООН, санкции Совета Федерации Российской Федерации и во исполнении соглашения о дружбе и взаимопонимании с ДНР и ЛНР. Сейчас поступает много информации на эту тему, ее пока еще предстоит проанализировать. Будем держать вас в курсе событий. Сейчас я возобновляю свои функции председателя Совета Безопасности и предоставляю слово представителю Украины.
Well, distinguished members of the Security Council, Secretary General, Under-Secretary. Before I try to deliver parts of the statement that I came here with tonight, most of it is already useless since 10 p.m. New York time. I would like to cite Article 4 of the UN Charter. And it says, membership in the United Nations is open to all other peace-loving states which accept the obligations contained in the present Charter and in the judgment of the organization are able and willing to carry out these obligations. Russia is not able to carry out any of the obligations. The ambassador of the Russian Federation 3 minutes ago confirmed that his president declared a war on my country. So before I read parts of my statement, I would like to avail of the presence of the Secretary General and request the Secretary General to distribute among the members of the Security Council and the members of the General Assembly the legal memos by the Legal Council of the United Nations dated December 1991, and in particular the legal memo dated 19th of December 1991. The one that we've been trying to get out of the Secretariat for a very long time, and we were denied to get it. The Article 4, Paragraph 2 of the Charter reads, the admission of any such state to membership in the United Nations will be affected by a decision of the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. Mr. Secretary General, please instruct the Secretariat to distribute among the members of the Security Council and the members of the General Assembly a decision by the Security Council dated December 1991 that recommends that the Russian Federation can be a member of this organization, as well as a decision by the General Assembly dated December 1991, where General Assembly welcomes the Russian Federation to this organization. It would be a miracle if the Secretariat is able to produce such decisions. There is nothing in the Charter of the United Nations about continuity as a sneaky way to get into the organization. So when I was coming here an hour ago or so, I was intending to ask the Russian ambassador to confirm on the record that the Russian troops will not start firing at Ukrainians today and go ahead with the offensive. It became useless 48 minutes ago. Because about 48 minutes ago, your president declared the war on Ukraine. So now I would like to ask the ambassador of the Russian Federation to say on the record that at this very moment, your troops do not shell and bomb Ukrainian cities, that your troops do not move in the territory of Ukraine. You have a smartphone, you can call Lavrov right now. We can make a pause to let you go out and call him. If you are not in a position to give an affirmative answer, the Russian Federation ought to relinquish responsibilities of the President of the Security Council, pass these responsibilities on to a legitimate member of the Security Council, a member that is respectful of the Charter, and I ask the members of the Security Council to convene an emergency meeting immediately and consider all necessary draft decisions to stop the war. Because it's too late, my dear colleagues, to speak about de-escalation. Too late. The Russian president declared the war on the record. Should I play the video of your president? Ambassador, shall I do that right now, or you can confirm it? Do not interrupt me, please. Thank you.
Then don't ask me questions when you are speaking. Proceed with your statement.
Anyway, you declared the war. It is the responsibility of this body to stop the war. So I call on every one of you to do everything possible to stop the war. Or should I play the video with your president declaring the war? Thank you very much.
Опять я вынужден сказать фразу, что я благодарю представителя Украины за его выступление. На вопросы я отвечать не планирую. Все, что я знаю сегодня, я уже сказал. Будить министра Лаврова в это время я не собираюсь. Мы сказали вам, что информация о том, как развиваются события, мы вам предоставим. И не называйте это войной, это называется специальной.
All right, this is Andrew Kraft back here again on Live Now from Fox. It's 10:45 Mountain Time. It's 12:45 in the morning on the East Coast, and it is 7:45 on a very early Thursday morning in Kyiv, Ukraine, as we continue to cover the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We know it has begun. We know there are loud explosions and blasts being heard in cities across the country at this point in time. Just want to give you some more updates. We are getting more and more tweet updates. This one from Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying that he and the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, spoke with Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, to condemn Russia's attack on Ukraine and discuss the alliance's coordinated response. We are united in responding to Russia and strengthening NATO's eastern flank. Let's go back to those Live Now looks we have out of Kyiv. At the moment, we also are getting a statement in from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry posting this on Facebook. I'm going to read in part. It says, today, February the 24th at 5 in the morning, the armed forces of the Russian Federation started intensive shelling of our units in the east and also launched rocket bomb strikes at the airports in 6 cities and so on through military objects of the armed forces of Ukraine. At the same time, the aggressor launched artillery shelling of the territory and settlements of Ukraine along the state border. The Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine is fighting off the air attack of the tanker. The defense forces of the state are in full combat readiness, occupied and maintain defense positions. The situation is under control. They say the information about the paratrooping of Russian troops into Odessa is not true. They end the statement saying, together we will win, ! So a Ministry of Defense statement from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense outlining what exactly is going on. This was put on Facebook. And so this is the clearest indication yet, the most detailed information yet about the types of defensive actions that are going on as we speak and when they started. And so they say that the armed forces of the Russian Federation started intensive shelling of our units in the east and also launched rocket bomb strikes at airports in 6 Ukrainian cities. Speaking of Russia, we do have a live now look out of Moscow at the moment. This just came into us. This is a new live now look. You can see there some of the main government buildings and religious buildings in the heart of Moscow. We also have a live now look down in the city in Ukraine of Mariupol. They have been experiencing blasts as well, and they have been hearing explosions and the like. I just want to listen into this if we can hear anything. Okay, so we just wanted to put these live now looks up as we continue to cover the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Andrew Kraft. Thank you so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. At the moment, we're tracking all of these live pictures, not only in Ukraine, but also we have this live now look out of Moscow in Russia. Of course, they are the aggressors in this situation. We saw and heard from Russian President Vladimir Putin, and we just got confirmation from Ukraine's defense ministry saying the armed forces of the Russian Federation started intensive shelling of our units in the east today, February the 24th at 5 in the morning. I'm Andrew Kraft. We're going to take a quick commercial break with more updates on this increasingly tense situation that is unfolding there in Eastern Europe, war in Europe after so many years. We'll be back in 2 minutes.